The bright dots of starlight stretched endlessly across the observation window of the stellar horizon. Dr. Samantha Mills stood there, watching the vast emptiness of space while sipping her third cup of coffee. The ship had been on its exploration mission for 6 months now, and she was starting to miss the simple pleasure of feeling real sunlight on her face. A sudden flash of purple light caught her attention. At first, she thought it might be another coffee-deprived hallucination, but the ship's alert system began to chime softly. Something was out there. Dr. Mills to the bridge. The intercom crackled with Captain Laura Stewart's calm voice. "We have company." Samantha hurried through the corridors, her heart beating faster with each step. This could be it, the moment every exploration mission hoped for. First contact. The bridge was already busy with activity when she arrived. Through the main viewport, she saw it. A ship unlike anything humans had ever built. It looked like a giant purple crystal, spinning slowly in space, reflecting starlight in ways that seemed to defy physics. "What do we know?" Samantha asked, moving to her station. "They're broadcasting some kind of signal," Communications Officer Jack Turner said, his fingers dancing across his console. "It's not radio waves, it's something else entirely. But the computer thinks it might be an attempt at communication." The crystal ship moved closer, and Samantha's instruments came alive with readings. The vessel's surface temperature changed constantly, creating patterns that reminded her of neural activity. "Captain," she said, "I think their ship might be alive, or at least partially biological." Before anyone could respond, a beam of light shot from the crystal ship, scanning the stellar horizon from bow to stern. The crew tensed, but their instruments showed no signs of harmful radiation or hostile intent. Then, something unexpected happened. The alien ship transmitted data directly to Samantha's science station. As she read the incoming information, her eyes grew wide. "They're confused about us," she said, trying to make sense of the alien measurements. "According to these readings, they think we shouldn't be alive. They're measuring our biological systems, but something about their results doesn't make sense to them." The crystal ship moved even closer, now floating parallel to the stellar horizon. New data streamed in, and Samantha began to understand the source of the aliens' confusion. "They're called the Zixtherians," she explained to the bridge crew. "And they think we're impossible. Their scans show we're running on chemical energy, using liquid water as a solvent, and operating in what they consider extreme temperature variations. They can't understand how we're not falling apart." Captain Stewart leaned forward in her chair. "Are they hostile?" "No." Samantha shook her head, still reading. "They're scientists, like us. They're requesting permission to send a representative over. They want to study us because they think our biology defies their laws of nature." The captain considered this for a moment. "Tell them we accept, but under standard first contact protocols." When the Zixtherian delegation arrived in the ship's conference room 2 hours later, Samantha finally understood why they found humans so strange. The aliens looked like shifting clouds of gas contained within crystalline environmental suits. Their natural state was so different from human biology that they needed complex technology just to exist in the same room as the crew. The lead alien scientist, who introduced itself as Zixcar, spoke through a translation device. "Your bodies," it said, its voice filled with wonder. "They maintain form without crystalline structure. You move through space that would destroy our essence. You consume organic matter for energy. How do you not dissolve?" Samantha smiled, realizing that everything she had learned about human biology, all those basic facts about cells, muscles, and organs that seemed so simple in medical school, was about to challenge everything these advanced aliens thought they knew about life itself. "Well," she said, pulling up a basic diagram of human cellular structure on her tablet, "let me show you something that might surprise you even more." She watched as the alien scientists clustered around her screen, their gaseous forms swirling with what she assumed was excitement or confusion. The greatest discovery in human history had just begun with a simple biology lesson, and Samantha couldn't wait to see what would happen next. The news spread quickly through the stellar horizon. The Sixtharians wanted to run tests on human biology. The alien scientists had spent 3 days studying basic human medical texts, and their confusion had only grown stronger. They couldn't believe that such primitive biological systems could support intelligent life. Lieutenant Chris Baker sat in the ship's gym, listening to Dr. Samantha Mills explain the situation. The aliens had requested a volunteer for physical testing, and as the ship's top athlete, he seemed like the perfect choice. "So they think we're going to break?" Chris asked, putting down his water bottle. He had just finished his daily workout, and his t-shirt still showed signs of sweat. "They think we're already broken," Samantha replied. "Their bodies are made of gas held in crystal matrices. The idea of soft tissue and liquid blood seems incredibly fragile to them. They keep asking how we don't just collapse into puddles." Chris laughed. "Wait until they see what we can really do." The next morning, Chris stood in the newly prepared testing chamber. The Sixtharians had converted part of their crystal ship into an environment where both species could exist safely. Their chief scientist, Zixcar, floated nearby in its environmental suit, its gaseous form swirling with what humans had learned to recognize as excitement. "We will begin with basic mobility tests," Zixcar announced through its translator. "Please perform what you call running until you need to stop." Chris looked at Samantha, who stood behind a monitoring station. She nodded encouragingly. He started jogging on the treadmill the aliens had built to human specifications. 10 minutes passed, then 20, then an hour. The Sixtharians' crystalline forms began to vibrate in what seemed like agitation. "Your cellular structure should have destabilized by now," Zixcar said. "How are you maintaining form under such stress?" Chris, barely breathing hard, smiled. "I could do this all day. This is just a light jog." The aliens' next test involved temperature adaptation. They gradually raised and lowered the room temperature, expecting the human to show signs of biological breakdown. Instead, they watched in amazement as Chris's body automatically adjusted, sweating when hot and shivering when cold. "Your liquid cooling system. This sweat, it actually works." Vextril, the alien medical officer, asked in disbelief. "And you don't lose structural integrity." "Works better than any cooling system we've built," Chris replied, wiping his forehead with a towel. But it was the impact test that really shocked them. The aliens wanted to see how human tissue responded to physical stress. They had Chris punch a testing pad, expecting his hand bones to shatter on impact. The testing pad broke instead. Impossible. Zixcar's gaseous form swirled violently inside its suit. "Your calcium-based support structures should have failed. How can such soft beings generate such force?" Samantha stepped in to explain. "Our bones aren't just rigid support structures. They're living tissue that constantly rebuilds itself. The same goes for our muscles. The more we use them, the stronger they get." The aliens fell into what seemed like stunned silence. Their crystalline forms stopped moving entirely, which the humans had learned meant they were deeply shocked or confused. "You mean," Vextril finally said, "your bodies become stronger when damaged?" "Within reason," Samantha replied. "It's called adaptation. Every human here is the product of millions of years of evolution that favored adaptability over specialization." Chris demonstrated more physical feats, jumping, climbing, balancing on one leg. Each simple action caused more confusion among the alien scientists. To them, every movement should have caused a catastrophic breakdown in human biological systems. "We must revise all our theories," Zixcar declared at the end of the testing session. "These humans, they are not primitive at all. They are something else entirely." As Chris toweled off and headed for the shower, he couldn't help but smile at the aliens' reactions. Humans had always thought they would impress alien life with their technology or culture. Instead, they were amazing them with something as simple as going for a run. "Tomorrow," he heard Zixcar say to its fellow scientists, We must test their repair functions. Their claim about healing from damage cannot possibly be true. Chris touched a small scar on his arm, a reminder of a childhood accident that had healed long ago. The aliens were in for another surprise. Dr. Amy Rodriguez walked into the alien testing chamber carrying a tray of food from the Stellar Horizons cafeteria. The Zixtherian scientists had been fascinated by Lieutenant Chris Baker's physical abilities, but now they wanted to understand how humans powered these impossible functions. This is what you consume for energy. Zixkar's crystalline form sparkled with confusion as it studied the contents of the tray. There was a sandwich, an apple, a cup of yogurt, and a chocolate cookie. Yes, Amy said, setting down the tray. We can eat a wide variety of organic materials for energy. This is just a small sample. Vex Trill, the alien medical officer, moved closer to scan the food. But these are completely different molecular structures. How can your processing system handle such variety? That's what makes our digestive system special, Amy explained, picking up the apple. We can break down many different types of organic matter and convert them into energy. Watch. She took a bite of the apple, and the aliens' forms began swirling frantically. Their sensors went wild as they watched her chew and swallow. You just integrated unknown biological matter into your system, Vex Trill exclaimed, without any analysis or preparation. Amy smiled. Our bodies are very good at figuring out what's useful and what isn't. We've evolved to be able to eat many different things. It helps us survive in different environments. She continued eating while the aliens took readings. They were especially confused by the chocolate cookie. This item has no nutritional purpose, Zixkar stated. Why consume it? Because it tastes good, Amy replied. We also eat for pleasure, not just survival. The aliens turned to each other, their gaseous forms mixing slightly as they communicated in their own way. The idea of eating for enjoyment seemed to puzzle them even more than the biology involved. The conversation was interrupted when Chris Baker entered the chamber. He had a small cut on his arm from accidentally catching it on a sharp edge earlier that day. Perfect timing, Amy said. The wound healing demonstration. The aliens crowded around Chris's arm, watching in amazement as their instruments showed human cells actively working to repair the damage. Your bodies contain automated repair systems. Zixkar asked, its voice translator struggling to convey its astonishment. All living things on Earth have some form of healing, Amy explained. When we're injured, our bodies immediately begin repairs. Watch what happens over the next few days. The cut will close up and eventually disappear completely. Days? Vex Trill's form pulsed with surprise. Such rapid regeneration should be impossible without external intervention. Chris flexed his arm. This is nothing. You should see how fast kids heal. I used to get scraped knees all the time when I was young. They'd be better in no time. The aliens were silent for a moment, processing this information. Then Zixkar spoke again. We must discuss your sleeping patterns. Our scans show that humans become unconscious for hours at a time. How do you survive such a vulnerable state? Amy pulled up a diagram on her tablet. Sleep isn't a vulnerability. It's one of our greatest strengths. During sleep, our bodies repair themselves, process information, and prepare for the next day. It's like a daily maintenance cycle. And during this sleep, you can still react to danger, Vex Trill asked. Of course, Chris said. Loud noises, sudden movements, even unfamiliar smells can wake us up. Our brains keep monitoring our surroundings even while we rest. The alien scientists began comparing notes, their crystalline forms reflecting light in complex patterns. They had started these tests expecting to find primitive biological systems, but each new discovery showed them just how wrong they had been. We have studied thousands of species across hundreds of star systems, Zixkar finally said. But we have never encountered biology like yours. You are not primitive at all. You are extraordinary. Amy looked at Chris and smiled. They both knew this was just the beginning. There was still so much more to show their new alien friends about the amazing capabilities of human biology. And somewhere out in the vast universe, their crystal ship would spread the word about the remarkable species they had discovered, humans. A loud alarm pierced through the peaceful quiet of space. The crystal ship's smooth surface suddenly flickered with pulses of red light. Inside the testing chamber, the Zixtherian scientists began moving in frantic patterns, their gaseous forms swirling wildly within their environmental suits. Emergency! Zixkar's translator crackled with unusual static. Our ship's environmental systems are failing. Dr. Samantha Mills watched in horror as the temperature readings on her tablet began to spike. The crystal ship's delicate balance was breaking down. For the fragile Zixtherians, this wasn't just uncomfortable, it was life-threatening. Our backup systems are not responding, Vextril announced, its usually steady form now compressed into a tight, worried ball inside its suit. The crystal matrix is destabilizing. We cannot survive these conditions. Captain Laura Stewart's voice came through the communication system. Dr. Mills, what's happening over there? Samantha quickly checked her readings. Their ship maintains very specific conditions for their gaseous forms to remain stable. Something has damaged their control systems. The temperature is rising, and the atmospheric pressure is becoming unstable. Can they evacuate to our ship? The captain asked. Negative, Samantha replied. Their environmental suits are connected to their ship's systems. They only have about 30 minutes of independent life support. Chris Baker stepped forward. What about their engineering room? Could we help fix the problem? Zixkar's form flickered anxiously. The engineering section is now at 45 degrees Celsius and rising. No Zixtherian can survive those temperatures without our environmental systems. It is beyond our physical limitations. Chris looked at Samantha, then at Paul Martinez, who had been quietly observing the aliens' technology. A silent understanding passed between the three humans. That temperature is uncomfortable for us, Paul said, but we can handle it. Let us help. The aliens' forms shifted in what humans had learned to recognize as shock. Impossible. You would cook from the inside. Your liquid bodies would boil. Samantha stepped in to explain. Human bodies can actually work in a wide range of temperatures. We have systems to cool ourselves down. Chris and Paul can go to your engineering section and make repairs. But the radiation levels are also rising, Vextril protested. Our containment fields are failing. We can handle some radiation exposure for short periods, Paul said, already removing his jacket. Just tell us what needs to be fixed. The Zixtherians had no choice but to trust the humans. They quickly projected a holographic map of their ship's systems, pointing out the critical components that needed repair. Chris and Paul made their way through the crystal ship's corridors. The temperature kept rising, and sweat began soaking through their clothes. The air felt thick and heavy, but their bodies automatically adjusted, sweating more to keep their core temperature stable. Look at these readings, Paul said, checking the scanner. The radiation would kill their gaseous forms instantly, but our bodies can take it for a little while. They reached the engineering section, where crystal panels pulsed with erratic energy patterns. Paul immediately recognized the problem. A power surge had damaged the main control crystal, and the backup systems weren't aligned properly. The two humans worked quickly, their hands steady despite the heat and radiation. Paul's engineering knowledge combined with Chris's strength allowed them to physically realign the backup crystals, something the Zixtherians could never have done with their gaseous forms. After 20 minutes of intense work, the ship's systems began to stabilize. The temperature slowly dropped, and the radiation levels returned to normal. Through their communication devices, they could hear the Zixtherians making sounds that the translator interpreted as sighs of relief. Back in the main chamber, the alien scientists stared at the humans with new understanding. They had just witnessed something they thought impossible: organic beings voluntarily entering what they considered lethal conditions, working effectively despite physical stress, and emerging largely unharmed. You risked your lives, Zixkar said softly. Chris wiped sweat from his forehead and smiled. Actually, we were never in real danger. This is what humans do. We help others, even when things get tough. It's not just our bodies that are adaptable. It's who we are. The crisis wasn't over yet. Even though Chris Baker and Paul Martinez had fixed the main systems, deep inside the crystal ship, something was still wrong. The Sixtharians detected a crack forming in their ship's power core, a delicate crystal matrix that powered everything from life support to artificial gravity. If the core shatters, the energy release will destroy both our ships, Sixcar explained, its gaseous form turning a dark shade of purple with worry. Paul studied the holographic display of the damaged section. The crack is spreading because of heat stress. We need to get in there and stabilize it with a cooling solution. Impossible. Vextrol's form pulsed rapidly. The core chamber is flooded with toxic gas. Even your remarkable biology cannot survive those conditions. Dr. Samantha Mills looked at the readings and then at the environmental suits the Sixtharians wore. What if we modified one of your suits to work for a human? The aliens were quiet for a moment, their crystalline shells reflecting light as they considered this idea. It would only provide 5 minutes of protection. Sixcar said finally. The chemical conversion rate of your breathing would overwhelm the filters too quickly. 5 minutes might be enough, Chris said. He turned to Paul. If you can guide me through the repair process, I can get in and out fast. The next few minutes were a blur of activity. The aliens helped modify one of their spare environmental suits while Paul prepared the cooling solution and explained the repair process to Chris. Dr. Amy Rodriguez monitored Chris's vital signs as he prepared for what the aliens considered a suicide mission. Your heart rate is already elevated, Amy noted as she helped Chris into the modified suit. I'm not nervous, Chris replied. It's adrenaline. My body's getting ready for action. The aliens watched in fascination as Chris's body automatically prepared itself for the challenge ahead. His pupils dilated, his muscles tensed, and his breathing deepened, all automatic responses that the Sixtharians had never seen before. When Chris entered the core chamber, the toxic gas swirled around the suit like green smoke. He moved quickly, fighting against the awkward feeling of the alien environmental suit. The crack in the crystal core was clearly visible, spreading like ice on a pond. 3 minutes of air left. Paul's voice crackled through the communication system. The cooling solution needs to be applied directly to the crack. Chris worked fast, his hand steady despite the pressure. Years of military training had taught him to stay focused even when every second counted. He carefully applied the cooling solution along the crack, watching as it began to stabilize the crystal structure. 1 minute of air, Amy warned. Chris, you need to get out now. But Chris could see the crack wasn't fully sealed. If he left now, all his work would be for nothing. He kept going, even as the suit's warning system screamed at him. Air supply critical. Multiple voices shouted in his ear. Chris applied the last of the cooling solution and turned to run. His lungs were burning and his vision was starting to blur, but his body kept moving. He burst through the chamber door just as the suit's air supply failed completely. The emergency decontamination system sprayed him with cleansing chemicals as Paul and Amy helped him out of the suit. Chris fell to his knees, gasping for air, but he was alive and smiling. Core stabilization confirmed, Sixcar announced, its voice containing what sounded like awe. You continued working even after your air supply reached critical levels. How did you make that choice? Chris, still catching his breath, looked up at the alien scientist. Wasn't really a choice. Humans do what needs to be done. Our bodies can handle more than what's comfortable when the situation calls for it. The aliens gathered around Chris, their forms moving in patterns that suggested deep thought. They had just witnessed something that challenged their understanding not just of biology, but of consciousness itself. A being choosing to push past what should have been impossible and succeeding. We must revise our understanding of intelligence itself, Vextrol said quietly. Perhaps the ability to ignore physical limitations is not a sign of primitiveness, but of advancement we never considered possible. 2 days after the Crystal Core incident, Dr. Samantha Mills and Dr. Amy Rodriguez stood before a large group of Zixtherian scientists. The alien ship had called for reinforcements, and now 3 more crystal vessels had arrived to study the humans. The presentation chamber was filled with swirling gaseous forms in environmental suits, all eager to learn about these fascinating creatures. Everything we thought we knew about advanced life forms was wrong, Zixcar announced to the gathered scientists. These humans have shown us that our definition of biological superiority was too narrow. Samantha stepped forward and activated a holographic display showing the human body's systems. What you see as primitive is actually the result of millions of years of evolution focused on adaptability rather than specialization. The alien scientists watched in amazement as she showed them videos of human activities from Earth. People running marathons in the desert, swimming in cold oceans, climbing mountains without protective equipment, working in conditions that would instantly destroy a Zixtherian. But how can such a simple system be so effective? One of the new alien scientists asked, its form rippling with confusion. Amy pulled up her medical data from the recent crisis. Look at what happened when Lieutenant Baker went into your core chamber. His body automatically made dozens of adjustments. His heart pumped faster to deliver more oxygen. His muscles received more blood flow. His brain released chemicals to increase focus and reduce pain. The aliens' forms swirled faster as they studied the data. They had never seen a biological system that could make so many changes so quickly. And all of this happens without conscious control, another scientist asked. Most of it, yes, Samantha explained. Our bodies handle these adjustments automatically. We don't have to think about it. This leaves our minds free to solve problems and make decisions. She showed them brain scans taken during the crisis. See how these areas lit up. Chris was scared. That's natural. But his brain used that fear to become more alert and focused. What you might see as primitive emotions actually help us survive. The presentation continued as the human doctors shared more data. They explained how human children learn to walk by falling and getting up again, how broken bones grow back stronger, how human immune systems learn to fight new diseases. Each example caused more excitement among the alien scientists. Their technology isn't primitive either, Zixcar added. They don't need crystal matrices or complex environmental suits because their bodies can handle changing conditions. Their tools are simple because their biology is so adaptable. A young alien scientist moved forward, but surely there must be limits. No system can be this flexible. Amy smiled and pulled up one more set of data. Of course there are limits. Humans can't survive in space without protection. We can't breathe water. Extreme temperatures will kill us. But within our limits, we have more flexibility than any species you've encountered. She showed them statistics about human populations living in different environments on Earth. From frozen tundra to burning deserts, from high mountains to deep valleys, humans had found ways to survive and thrive. We're not invincible, Samantha added. We're adaptable. That's our strength. We don't need perfect conditions because we can work with whatever conditions we find. The chamber filled with the soft chiming sounds the aliens made when they were excited. Their entire understanding of biological advancement had been turned upside down. They had always thought that perfect adaptation to specific conditions was the height of evolution. Now they were seeing how being able to adapt to changing conditions might be an even greater achievement. We must rewrite all our scientific texts, Zixcar announced. The humans have shown us that we were measuring advancement by the wrong standards. Their primitive biology is actually the most sophisticated system we have ever encountered. As the alien scientists broke into small groups to discuss this revelation, Samantha and Amy shared a quiet smile. Sometimes the best way to advance science was to prove that everything you thought you knew was wrong. 1 week after the crisis, the crew of the Stellar Horizon gathered in the ship's main conference room. On the large view screen, The 4 crystal ships of the Zixtherian science fleet sparkled against the backdrop of space. Captain Laura Stewart sat at the head of the table, reading the official message from the Zixtherian High Council. In recognition of their remarkable biological capabilities and advancement, we hereby classify humans as a Level 1 species, she read aloud. All Zixtherian vessels are encouraged to establish scientific and cultural exchange programs with human representatives. Dr. Samantha Mills couldn't help but smile. Just 2 weeks ago, the aliens had thought humans were barely worth studying. Now they were ranked among the most advanced species in known space. They're still trying to understand how we eat different foods, Chris Baker said, taking a bite of his sandwich. The aliens had been particularly fascinated by the human habit of casual eating during meetings. Hall Martinez nodded. And they can't believe we're sitting here in normal room temperature without environmental suits. To them, we might as well be superheroes. But that's not why they ranked us so highly, Amy Rodriguez pointed out. It's because we showed them a different kind of advancement, one they had never considered before. The captain set down the message tablet. The Zixtherians want to establish a permanent research station near Earth. They believe studying human biology could help them develop new technologies. They're already working on it, Samantha said. Vextril showed me their plans for a new type of environmental suit based on how human skin works. They're trying to make their protection systems more adaptable, like our bodies. Through the view screen, they watched as one of the crystal ships began creating a strange new structure. It looked like a combination of their crystalline technology and more traditional human-style architecture. That's going to be the first joint research lab, Amy explained, a place where both species can work together comfortably. The Zixtherians are very excited about learning from us. Learning from us? Chris asked. But their technology is centuries ahead of ours. Technology isn't everything, the captain replied. They've realized that our biology solved problems they're still struggling with. Our ability to adapt, to heal, to survive in changing conditions. These are things their advanced technology hasn't matched yet. Zixkar's image appeared on a second screen. The alien scientist's gaseous form seemed more organized now, as if it had learned to control itself better from studying humans. We have begun sharing our findings with other species, it announced. Many are skeptical, but we have the data to prove everything. Humans are redefining what we consider advanced life forms. What happens next? Paul asked. We learn from each other, Samantha replied. The Zixtherians have incredible technology and knowledge of space. We have our adaptability and different way of solving problems. Together, we could make amazing discoveries. The meeting continued as they discussed plans for future cooperation. The Zixtherians would share their space travel technology, while humans would help them understand biological adaptation. Both species had something to teach and something to learn. Later that day, Samantha stood at her favorite observation window, watching the crystal ships prepare for their journey back home. Soon, the first human scientists would go with them to study Zixtherian technology, while some of the aliens would travel to Earth to study human biology. Quite a change from 2 weeks ago, Chris said, joining her at the window, when they thought we were too primitive to be worth studying. Samantha nodded. Sometimes the simplest things are actually the most advanced. Our bodies might seem basic compared to their crystal technology, but nature spent millions of years perfecting our adaptability. That's what they finally understood. As the crystal ships prepared to depart, their surfaces lit up in a beautiful display of colors, a Zixtherian sign of respect. The humans had not only survived their first contact with an advanced alien species, they had amazed them. And this was just the beginning. The truth about human biology had changed everything. Not because humans were the strongest, or the fastest, or the most advanced, but because they were the most adaptable. In a universe full of countless different environments and challenges, that might be the greatest strength of all.